Why good small businesses still get ignored. A business can be competent, honest, hardworking, and still be overlooked. That is one of the more frustrating truths in small business. Because from the owner's point of view, it feels unfair. You do the work properly, you care about quality, you try to treat people well, you keep things moving, you build something decent, and yet somehow the business still struggles to get noticed in the way it should. That happens more often than many people like to admit, because being good is not always enough. A business also has to feel relevant, distinctive, compelling, easy to notice, easy to remember, and easy to prefer. That is where desirability comes in. So in this video, I want to explain why good small businesses still get ignored and why competence alone does not guarantee attention, interest, or preference. One of the first things to understand is that markets do not reward goodness automatically. That may sound a bit bleak, but it is true. The market is noisy, people are busy, attention is fragmented, options are everywhere. And most buyers are not walking around actively looking for the most diligent or thoughtful provider in abstract terms. They are looking for something that catches, fits, reassures, or feels right. That means a business can be decent in substance and still weak in visibility, memorability, or pull. And this is where many small businesses become unintentionally passive. They assume that if the work is solid, people will gradually recognize that and respond. Sometimes that happens over time, but often it does not happen clearly enough, quickly enough, or consistently enough to create real momentum. Because markets do not just respond to competence, they respond to signals. What does the business feel like? How quickly does someone understand what it is? How distinct does it seem? Does it feel like more of the same, or does it create some sense of character, relevance, or edge? That matters a great deal. And it is often what gets left out of the conversation when owners say, "But we do a good job." I do not doubt that they do, but good job is not by itself a strong market signal. It is a private truth that still needs public expression. That is the crucial point. Desirability is not about manipulation or hype. It is about whether the business gives people enough reason to notice it, feel something about it, and remember it. That may come from clarity, it may come from style, it may come from sharper positioning, it may come from more distinctive language, it may come from a stronger sense of identity, it may come from a more compelling promise. But whatever form it takes, desirability matters because attention is not automatic. Small businesses often think in terms of quality and value, which is right and important. But they do not always think enough about attraction. Why should someone notice this business in the first place? Why should they remember it? Why should they feel drawn toward it, rather than simply acknowledging that it exists? Those are not superficial questions. They are commercially serious questions. Because a business that is merely acceptable may survive, but a business that feels more compelling is much more likely to be chosen, mentioned, revisited, and recommended. This is especially important for small businesses because they rarely have the luxury of brute force visibility. A large firm may be noticed simply because it is large. It may have reach, advertising budget, familiarity, and sheer presence. A small business usually needs to create interest more intelligently than that. It needs to become easier to notice and easier to care about. And that requires more than competence. It requires some form of desirability. Now, desirability does not mean turning the business into a circus. It does not mean becoming exaggerated, flashy, or insincere. It simply means recognizing that in a crowded world, being worthy is not always enough. The business also needs to feel alive in some way. It needs to have shape. It needs to communicate itself in a way that gives people something to respond to. And this is where good businesses often accidentally flatten themselves. They use language that is too general. They present themselves too cautiously. They strip out too much personality. They become respectable, but not memorable. And then they wonder why they are being overlooked. The answer is often not that the business lacks quality. It is that the business lacks enough visible distinction or pull. So what is the better way to think about this? I think the first step is to stop asking only, "Are we good?" That matters, of course, but it is not the whole question. A better question is, why would someone notice us? Why would they remember us? Why would they prefer us? Why would this business feel more compelling than the alternatives? Those questions take you into much more useful territory, because they force the business to think about attention, preference, and market response, not just private standards. And once you do that, the conversation changes. You start thinking more clearly about positioning, about expression, about identity, about promise, about how the business feels from the outside, not just how it looks from the inside. That is important, because many good businesses do not need to become better at the work. They need to become better at being seen, understood, and preferred. That is a very different challenge, and it is often the one that creates the commercial difference. So yes, good small businesses still get ignored. Not always because they are doing poor work, not always because the market is unfair, and not always because they need more effort. Often because competence alone does not create attention. The business also has to create interest, recognition, and some form of desirability. And once that becomes clear, it becomes much easier to work on the real issue. If this kind of practical small business thinking is useful to you, I have built the Small Business Advantage audio field guide for busy small business owners who want clearer thinking on value, desirability, positioning, promotion, and risk. You can explore it at TradShack.com.